Tonight we begin phase 2. What's up guys, I'm Ryan, welcome to my channel if you are new here. So tonight, as I said, we begin phase 2 of the MCU by watching Iron Man 3. If you are new here, I'm doing a series where I watch through and review all the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so that at the end of this I can do a fair, proper, honest ranking of all 37 films that will be at that point. I believe it's been about a year maybe a bit longer since I went through all the films in the MCU in order, so I could have tried to do a ranking off the top of my head and from memory from the last time I watched them all, but I don't think that ranking would have been very honest and accurate since it's been so long since I've watched all the films again. So I'm going through again and watching and reviewing them all so I can have them fresh in my mind and so I can do a proper honest ranking. And also, you can't have a movie channel without giving your thoughts on all the MCU films, right? So tonight we are going to watch Iron Man 3, gonna pop the film in the player and then give my thoughts afterwards, see if we can find any good messages or anything. So yeah, I'll see y'all after. What's up guys, it is after the movie. So let's get started talking about Iron Man 3. Spoilers, by the way, if you have not seen the film. I know I've said this a lot already in all my other MCU reviews, but Robert Downey Jr. is just like perfectly cast as Tony Stark. He is Tony Stark, he is Iron Man. That's what I was thinking throughout this entire film. Whenever he was on screen, whenever he spoke, I'm just like, dang, Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. He is so good in the role. His behavior, his line delivery, it's all just like perfect. Tony, he has this ego, he's very kind of pompous and showy at times, he's maybe a bit too self-confident, but the way they write him and the way Robert Downey Jr. plays this character and his performance and just the way he says things and delivers his lines is just, he's so likable, he's so entertaining, they make you want to root for him. But even though he is a bit selfish at times and a bit showy, not the most humble person, they do a great job of also bringing out that side of him that loves to help people and save people. That's why Tony is Iron Man, that's why he makes the technology that he does, so he can help people, and I just love how they clearly bring out and show that passion for wanting to help and save people. If I had to list like the top 10 or 5 comic book movie castings, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man would definitely be in the top 5. And of course we get Gwyneth Paltrow back as Pepper Potts, who does a great job in this film. Don Cheadle is back as Rhodey, who is actually Iron Patriot in this film. He does a really good job as well. I love seeing him and Tony working together in this film towards the end. Jon Favreau is back as Happy Hogan. He has some really funny bits in this film. Guy Pearce and Ben Kingsley as our villains, Aldrich Killian and the Mandarin. I thought they did a fine job and they were fine villains. I'll touch more on them a bit later. Also want to shout out a couple actors that I really enjoy that appear in this film that have little cameos. They're not very big roles, they only have like one line, if any, but I really enjoyed seeing them here. One is Jenna Ortega. She played, I believe, the Vice President's daughter or granddaughter, and I just thought that was so insane. She's like a big actress now, and she has this little cameo non-speaking role in Iron Man 3. That's just insane when things like that happen, like these big popular actors, like just seeing them back when they were like no names at the time. I grew up with Jenna Ortega on Disney Channel on the show Stuck in the Middle, and she of course plays Wednesday on the Netflix show, which is my favorite show currently running. I absolutely cannot wait for season 2. We also get a little cameo from Corey Hawkins, who played Benny in The Heights from a few years ago. If you don't know what that is, it is a musical from the creator of Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I really enjoy that film, and Benny was probably my favorite character, so it's nice seeing him here as well. And then another little character we see appear here in the beginning is Jensen. We get him back in the flashback to Switzerland in the beginning of the movie. Now I want to talk about the story. The story here I think is actually pretty good. Like, every time I watch Iron Man 3, it's a bit better than I remember that I'm expecting it to be, or at least Tony's part of the story is. The villain side of things, it's a bit generic, but once again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. I thought it was interesting how Tony deals with PTSD from the Battle of New York, from the Avengers, especially when he was going through the portal and he started passing out and he wasn't sure if he was going to make it back, and he falls through the portal just as it's closing and he makes it through just in time. I thought that was interesting how they kind of how he was having anxiety attacks in this film, and Tony's this character who, like I said, is very confident, who doesn't really, I don't think really shows his emotions too easily, like how he's actually feeling, doesn't like to show himself as vulnerable or anything like that, but in this film, he is very vulnerable, and people can clearly see that he's struggling. I love how Tony is actually without his armor for a decent chunk of the film, and I just thought that was really impressive because even when Tony's not in the suit, he's just as entertaining to follow, and like how he's trying to make his way across country, getting help from, you know, strangers, and he's like investigating, and at times in this film it feels like he's like a secret agent, like a spy or a cop at some points in this movie. I love when he makes a digital version of the crime scene where Happy fell into a coma when that extremist soldier blew up. And he's like moving things around and trying to investigate, looking at news stories about the Mandarin and his attacks and all of that. Those scenes are always very visually pleasing and cool to watch. I love how Tony, when he's like in that, I think, news van trying to find out where the Mandarin is, and that guy comes in, he's like, shh, and then he's like, and he's like showing Tony his tattoo, saying he's like his biggest fan, and Tony's like, I need you to calm down. Tony needs Gary. Tony needs Gary. I just love how Tony's like getting help from these random strangers, like as he's trying to make his way to where the Mandarin is. Especially the character of Harley, which is probably the best thing about this film, or the thing I most enjoyed, is that relationship with Harley, played by Ty Simpkins, who they bring back in Avengers Endgame at Tony's funeral scene, which I thought was just one of the many little things Endgame does that made it so awesome. But I love the relationship with Harley and how like he's freaking out when he sees the Iron Man suit and all that, and he gives him advice about bullies. He gives him that little like flashlight thingy. There's hints of like a father-son type relationship with Tony and Harley. I love how Harley's trying to talk to Tony about the battle in New York and what it was like, and he starts having an anxiety attack, and that scene where he's driving and he's talking to Harley over the phone, he starts having an anxiety attack, and Harley's trying to help him calm down. He's like, you're a mechanic, why don't you build something? I thought that was a really nice, well done scene. Although Tony is a bit rude to him, it's still so fun to see their back and forth. The dialogue in this film, or most of the film, is pretty well written, I thought, and the delivery and the performances are just as good. Speaking of dialogue, once again, this film has that MCU humor. It is pretty funny. It's always much funnier than I remember it being. My favorite joke probably being after when Iron Man's about to leave the little, I believe, Tennessee town where Harley lives, and he's like, hey, I just saved your life. You need me. We're connected. And then Tony's like, no, this is over. And then he gets in the car and he rolls down the window. He's like, I'm sorry, kid. You did good. He's like, now you're just gonna leave me here like my father? He's like, yeah. Wait, you're trying to guilt trip me, aren't you? It's like, and then Harley's like, I'm cold. And then Tony's like, I can tell. You know how I can tell? 'Cause we're connected. And then he just drives off, and then Harley's like, it's worth the shot. Like, every joke in this film puts a smile on my face. It's not like laugh out loud funny, but that was the joke, the only joke that was like actually laugh out loud funny. Like, that was the most hilarious scene. Robert Downey Jr.'s delivery was just perfect in that scene. I actually may have gone back and rewatched that scene, that joke, on YouTube a couple times before filming this review. Another really good thing about this film is the final fight. Once again, a lot better than I remember it being. It's actually a really cool fight scene with all the armors, especially I love Tony's Mark 42 armor, and in the beginning where he injects himself with that serum or whatever it was, that where he can call the armor and all the pieces fly on and attach themselves. I thought that those kind of scenes were really cool. And the ending fight scene where he has all his armors and he's like jumping from armor to armor. He's injecting himself from one armor and then jumps into the next one and injects himself from that one. And he's like hopping into a new armor like every 10 seconds. It's a really cool fight scene at the end, I thought. And I love the scene where Rhodey, it's kind of funny that he's without an armor in the final fight scene. He just has a gun. And he's like on a what's it called, shipping container, and these two extremist soldiers are coming at him. It's like being held by two chains, like shoots one of the chains, and then like it like flips around and he lands on the platform and the extremist soldiers get dumped in the water. That was a really cool scene visually. I actually don't mind that Pepper actually got kind of the final blow in this film. I like when she takes out Killian, she's like, oh, that was really violent. That joke made me smile. And one last thing before we get into some negatives, or like, I guess, more so mixed aspects about the film. The end credits scene here is pretty funny. It's nothing super important, but it's nice to see, it's a nice, funny little joke. It's nice to see Bruce Banner talking with Tony, or Tony talking to Bruce, telling him basically the whole story of the film, and he's like falling asleep, and then he wakes up and he's like, dude, did you just hear a word I just said? And Bruce is like, I'm not that type of doctor. That was really funny. I just love little scenes like that, even though they're not really important for the MCU going forward. I just love seeing, you know, the Avengers and other heroes in this world interacting, and it makes it feel like a populated, you know, comic book superhero world. Now let's start talking about some negative things about the film, and I'll start with the villains, and they weren't bad. Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian, I think, did a fine job. Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin, or Trevor, I think, was fine. I know, like, a lot of people's biggest complaint about this film is the Mandarin twist. I've never really minded the Mandarin twist, even before we got Shang-Chi. I've never been, prior to the MCU films, I've never been big on Iron Man or his lore. So I didn't really know who the Mandarin was at the time of watching this film for the first time. But since seeing this film and doing more research and learning more about Iron Man lore, the Mandarin does seem like a pretty cool, threatening, powerful villain, and much more popular an Iron Man villain than Aldrich Killian. Whenever I think of Iron Man villains now, the Mandarin does come to mind, and I always forget Aldrich Killian exists, actually. I don't mind what they did here. I don't mind the Mandarin twist. I don't hate it. I don't mind Aldrich Killian being the villain, but part of me wonders if it maybe would have been better if the Mandarin was the villain and he was, like, kind of more so how he is in the comics, and he wasn't fake, he wasn't just this actor working for Killian. I also feel that, well, at least part of Killian's motivation is a bit generic. He kind of just wants to, you know, take over the world, and usually, like, those power-hungry, like, take over the world type supervillains, I don't hate them, but they're kind of generic to me. They're not really very compelling. A great villain to me is someone who, like, I really understand why they're doing what they're doing. They're kind of the hero of their own story. I can see a little bit of myself in them, maybe. I can really understand where they're coming from, and they have this, like, emotional backstory. It's not just because they want to take over the world and they were hurt or something like that, like Killian was. Like I said, not bad. It was fine. And then one more negative about this film is there does seem to be a couple lapses in logic at some points in the film, like in the scene where Tony's chained to the bed and he's captured by Killian, and he's like trying to call the suit, which was a funny scene. But I was like, did they ever explain how he knew the suit was ready? Like, maybe I missed that line or something, but I'm pretty sure I didn't, so I'm just like, how did he know the suit was ready? And there's just a couple other instances like that in this film where it's like, did I miss a line explaining that or something? Also, I want to talk about the ending of this film for a second, because it's just, I believe, like, Robert Downey Jr.'s original contract stated that this was his last film and he didn't have to do any more after this. So the ending does feel a bit weird, because I don't think they knew at that point whether RDJ was going to return as Iron Man, so the ending does feel a little bit weird, but I don't know if I can really dock them for that because they didn't know. But I'm so glad RDJ stuck around and did many more films, and they continued his character arc and continued that build up, and that just made all the films that he's appeared in, everything Tony Stark did and everything he's gone through, everything he goes through in the Infinity Saga, just made that snap, like, so much more powerful and impactful, and it's probably one of the greatest scenes in not just superhero movie history, but movie history itself, honestly. I'm just so glad Robert Downey Jr. stuck around. I don't know what the MC would have been without him past this point. I just can't even picture it. And then one more thing before I wrap up this review. A couple interesting, good little messages I think we can pull out of this film is, one, that actions have consequences, and two, to watch how you treat people. The film starts out with a flashback to Switzerland in 1999, before Tony was in the cave, and he really had that change. He became a bit more humbled, where he was a bit more selfish, not exactly treating people very well. And Killian approaches him about asking Tony to join AIM, and he kind of brushes him off and, like, leaves him hanging on the roof. He tells him to meet him on the roof, and he, like, never shows up, and that's when Killian starts, you know, thinking about taking over the world. Tony says in the film that we create our own demons, and Tony definitely created a demon that came back to haunt him and be a big pain for him much later. I've talked about this kind of stuff in like my previous Iron Man reviews, and I don't think it was really, those points were really hammered home. It wasn't a big part of the story. They didn't touch on it a lot in the film. The film is more so just about Tony struggling with his PTSD, being stripped of his armor, being more vulnerable, having to use his brain and all that. I felt like the film focused more on that, and it was more emphasized than the messaging of the film. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the messaging of this film, just because I don't feel like they made it a big point in this film, and I've talked about it a decent amount already, I think. If you want to go check out my other Iron Man reviews and hear me talk about that kind of stuff more. But those are nice little messages that I think were communicated decently well. And like I said, I didn't think there was a big part of the story. They didn't really hammer it home. But just seeing how Tony treated Aldrich Killian back in Switzerland and how that affected his actions had consequences, and Killian came back and, you know, became a big pain and a problem for Tony to deal with in present day. So just, I thought it was nice how they communicated that your actions have consequences, and that they don't just have consequences for you, that they affect other people. You know, what Killian's doing is affecting the entire world. He kidnaps Pepper and gives her the extremist serum. And it kind of reminded me of, there's like a bunch of examples in the Bible, a bunch of verses I could have pulled from, but it really made me think of like David's adultery with Bathsheba and how that affected his family, and Adam and Eve in the garden, and how, you know, their sin in eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, how that affected them and has trickled down to all humanity, and we all now inherit that sinful nature. So your actions have consequences that don't just affect you, they affect other people. And also, watch how you treat people. I know the saying is actions speak louder than words, and I agree with that, but I definitely think both are pretty powerful things. And, you know, I think actions and words can make or break a person. They can make someone's day, or they can, you know, be that breaking point that causes someone to go down a certain path. Now, ultimately it is on them. But I think it's a really good point to hammer home that you should just watch how you treat people, and you never know what's going on in someone's personal life, how they might respond to certain things. So just a couple little good messages I thought we could pull out of the film. But overall, guys, I believe that is all I have to say about Iron Man 3. I think just a solid entry in the MCU. Overall, I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you think about Iron Man 3 down below in the comments. Would love to have a conversation with y'all about this film. Thank y'all so much for watching my review. And if you want to catch up on my other MCU reviews and continue on this journey with me through the MCU, like and subscribe right over here. That's right, I've learned how to do this now. And click right here to watch my previous MCU review of the Avengers. And right here is a playlist of all my MCU videos, so you can go back and watch all my reviews that I've done and a couple other MCU videos that I've done. I'll have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is when you're watching this video, and I'll see y'all next time.